The next few recordings are going to be a review of the process of consulting. And they're intended for anyone who's a consultant, whether it be within an organization as an internal consultant or as somebody from outside the organization as an external consultant. Like many things, consulting is a process. It's how do you do the research and the studying, and how do you provide feedback, and how do you create the relationship where you and your client see each other as equals, and do you have the skills to actually solve and enable the client to solve problems in the short term and enable them to resolve problems in the long term after you're finished. And this picture here shows sort of the long-term view of what a consulting assignment might look like, starting with getting agreement and the contracting phase and establishing wants and offers, which is really driven by the consultant in terms of setting up the project. This tends to be where most failures occur in a consultation. It's at the contracting phase. And we're going to spend much of our time in this particular recording on that concept. Once you get through that phase, you have a data collection phase where you try to understand the issues and get a clear picture. It's continually getting feedback so you can make decisions on what to do, how to implement, how to manage the change within the organization, to evaluate whether you've accomplished what you've wanted to accomplish, and then have considerations about what the next steps might be. When you're finished with a phase, is at the end of the contract? Is there more work to be done? Does recontracting need to occur? Or is your role no longer required? So that's the basics right there. Very often, both the consultant and the client will want to hurry through preliminary steps and get on with implementation. For the consultant, there's this secure feeling of going ahead with a solution that requires your expertise. For the client, they're feeling like they're getting something done. But as you rush towards that comfort of initially jumping to solutions, you can be neglecting the skills required in these critical preliminary steps. Clearly, as a consultant, you need to be very, very skilled. You come with technical skills. You come with your interpersonal skills and qualities, your skills of sensitivity and receptivity and empathy. But consulting has its own set of skills as well. Getting to the bottom of who the real client is. Very often the person who's communicating with you may not have the power, and there may be other individuals that need to be included. Understanding when you have a contract and when you don't. Getting to the bottom of expectations. Probing into a client's underlying concerns, their vulnerabilities. Identifying resistance points and knowing how to name them and deal with them. How you provide direct support. How you maintain a level of assertiveness with the client. And how you skillfully ask for feedback about how things are working. Through all of this, it's about being authentic with who you are, being compassionate, and being a model and building trust. This is a quick picture of what a way to kind of keep yourself on task in terms of acknowledging the client, communicating your understanding of the issues, identifying the client's wants and offers, critically important, as well as the consultant's wants and offers. As a consultant, you have issues as well that you need. If you have agreement, you can ask for concerns about control and commitment and things like that. You can practice support, and you can restate actions and move forward. But it's often the case where you get stuck on wants and offers, and then you have to constantly think through things and take breaks and reassess and have another conversation about wants and offers, and you can get stuck again. And do you have the skills to process how these conversations are handled? And can you have a good conversation that exchanges the wants and the offers so that you can understand each other? And if you are continuing to be stuck, you want to, as a client, know when to back off, when to minimize your investment, or to terminate a contract. If you go through all this and actually get agreement, that's good news, and you could move forward with the project. Why do we get stuck? Do you really care about this client when you're speaking to them? Can you see their world and their issues through their eyes? Can you reassure them that you understand them and want to be helpful? Can you restate in your own words, what your understanding of their issue is? And this doesn't mean how to solve it and how to create recommendations. That's just panicking or being anxious about trying to be helpful, but truly defining the issues at hand. Your client, based on their own emotional makeup, will seek control. And how much control do they want over this project? And what do you want from this project? And what does the client want out of the project, and what do they want from you? Do you feel like you deserve to state your wants and offers? What do you need to make this project successful? To get your own sense of the situation, to have access to relevant data, to be able to raise issues, difficult issues, and give critical feedback. And always thinking through, are we really in agreement? And keep restating the agreement, your understanding of where we're moving forward, and does the client understand what you're saying, and back and forth. Does your client have the skills to accept criticism? Can you work through with the client how to resolve their concerns around control and vulnerability? And is this project something that the client really wants, or is this something they feel like they're sort of being pushed into? It's quite possible that the client feels that the results of this project could be something that comes back at them and can hurt them in some way. And you need to uncover that and find that out. You're going to be confronting your client often. You're going to start seeing issues. And do they feel that as support? And in a sense, you are teaching the client how to work with you as you continue to give them positive feedback. And of course, when you're coming forth with who does what, and who owns the next steps, continuing to restate those things and have the sense of a project plan. All of these things, critically important to do this early and upfront. The consultant statement here, I wish they had done some of the hard things when they were easier to do. Because if these things happen too deep into the client engagement, they will be much, much more difficult to resolve. So moving through that conversation, you're going to start piecing together things like data collection and diagnosis, and learning how the client sees people who are contributing to the issue, and also making them think through how they themselves are contributing to the issue. And as you start to go back and forth, and getting feedback and how you're going to make decisions and make recommendations, again, in the early stages of the contract, of the project, is continuing to have a clear statement of the whole problem, and including the client's contribution to the problem. And you can give the client feedback on how they're managing you, which might serve as an example for how they're managing others. You can share things like what you like about what the client's doing, and you can share things about what they're doing that's valuable to you in helping them solve this problem. Basically, at the end of this all, you want to ensure that you've set up a relationship of collaboration. You want to have, as a consultant, influence on data collection and ultimately recommendations. You want to collaborate in the planning of how the organization will be informed of the project. You want decision making about who should be involved in data collection and in the interpretation of the results, and deciding what changes should be made. These are all valid considerations, including your desire to have influence on the outcome. Of course, you want to be appreciated for your efforts, and you really want the freedom to innovate, for the client, so they can move forward and solve their issues. So again, as a consultant, state the whole problem, your perceptions of the client, and your initial thoughts and recommendations. You as a consultant need to be in alignment with why you're doing this, to be authentic, to be in alignment with your values and your beliefs, strategies that you understand and you are willing to deploy, and the skills that you have. So just some quick examples of what that could mean in terms of alignment. I give two quick examples here. So if somebody had a personal value of health, they would need to have strategies in order to do that, such as sleeping and diet strategies and lifestyle strategies, etc. But the skills they need to have would be their knowledge of exercise and nutrition and willpower and things like that. In a sense, you need to know your consulting strategies and be very aware of what your skills are and what your beliefs are, and those all must be aligned with each other. Now, when clients seem resistant to recommendations and questions to you, the real resistance is their reluctance to confront some harsh realities in their own situation. Resistance is an indirect expression of the client's underlying concerns. It's a sign of change and learning. You can't have true learning without resistance and emotion. And resistance is not to be overcome, but to be understood and to be expressed. So what is a harsh reality? These are, again, the real concerns the client has about the project, concerns about control and vulnerability. And indirect expressions of concern are going to be when they start to avoid responsibility and blame others. In these conversations, state what you say, what you think. Give two good faith efforts in case they didn't understand one time. You say it again. If that doesn't help, as simply as possible, be the mirror. Tell the client what you see. And we're not going to be judgmental. We're just stating, our observations. And it's okay to let tensions rise. You really want to get this out in the open. And again, this is part of the human process of a client learning to move forward and change. Also, keep in mind that you as a consultant are resistant as well. You're worried about not being seen as relevant or competent, which can affect your own personal self-esteem. And you can see consultants, blaming the line managers, or start to give tons and tons of detail, to flood them with it, or start over-explaining things, or becoming argumentative, or becoming quiet. And all of these just tend to intensify client resistance. And that's something that you want to certainly stay away. At this point, you're not presenting yourself as an adequate role model. Instead, learn how to name the form of the resistance that you see. So things like you don't see yourself as a part of the problem. That would be the form of avoiding responsibility. Or you're giving me a lot of detail. Or you're angry. Or you're agreeable to anything I suggest. Or you keep changing the subject. Or you're being very quiet. Or you're looking for solutions before we've defined the problem. These are all things that you can state as observations and can help move the conversation forward and might help the client understand him or herself. Now, what happens when you do your best? You've negotiated once, you've dealt with the resistance, you're still stuck. Ask the client, what's it going to take to reach an agreement? Ask for concerns while you're being supportive. And if that doesn't work, discuss the possibility of not working together. That might be the right thing to do. And if ending the project is simply not an option, you can ask to postpone it because things might change down the road. You could minimize the scope of the project and just close it out, with some tactical deliverables. You could certainly narrow the objectives and reduce the project's visibility. Those are small wins, not what you originally wanted to do, but sometimes that is the reality of the situation. When you're done, sort of at the end of this conversation, and you have to ask for concerns about control, vulnerability, and commitment. If that didn't happen, you can see where things can go. Avoiding this or glossing over this step can result in an agreement that falls apart later, if the client feels that they're losing control or they're getting hurt. And if an agreement falls apart under questioning on issues like this, it was never an agreement. So you're, continually, trying to be honest with the client. You're trying to show appreciation and show how they're helping the process. And you are always restating who is responsible for what, and in terms of a project plan, and who's in charge of various areas of responsibility for the project. And as the client gets more involved, they can feel more secure in their involvement in the solution. Problems have two sides. And as you're going through your data collection and diagnosis, understand that there are technical business issues, which are the rational parts of the issues, and then there's how it's being managed, which is the emotional part of the business. So it's good to find out in your diagnosis how is this being managed? Help the clients identify their contribution to the issues. You need to develop a picture of things that are independent from the client's picture, so that you see things that they don't necessarily see or probably don't see. So clearly, yes, you're going to be gathering technical business data. You're going to be learning about how the issues are managed, and then talk about data in two ways: from how it looks today and how they wish it to look in the future, and making sure that you are organizing it and using these, to feedback and develop some joint recommendations about how to proceed. As consultants, once we have a contract and are beginning the data collection, we tend to gravitate towards the technical business difficulties. It's safer ground than the personal and the managerial side. And while looking at the technical side of the problem is necessary, it is the management data that often holds the key to the real problem. You as a consultant, your unique value to the client is your ability to see clearly how the problem is being managed. That's where we are truly the value add. You have goals here. So you can see here in terms of looking at goals, procedures, relationships, we need to look at all of these things in terms of how they are today and how they are in the future, how the client and the staff wants things to be in the future. And there's some examples right here. So, for example, you want to ask under procedures, how is information communicated? But in the future, what would meetings and systems be like if we were to solve the problem? So very important to query on both of those levels. So that this is still in the very beginning phases here. So you're coming up with your perceptions of the situation as you see it, how you see others' roles, how you see the client's roles, the client's personal feelings about the situation, what the future needs to look like, what the client is doing well, and what they've been doing, which has been helpful, and then getting the client to agree on what the next steps are in terms of a project plan, strategies that will be deployed, change management implications, any communication plans and strategies that need to be put into place, as well as a total project management. So that's really all I want to cover in terms of this first recording. I appreciate your time and attention on this, and I look forward to the future presentations.